see like a lot of people saying that someone who seems so nice is not nice at all.
She doesn't seem nice, but that people have a very poor judge of character. She doesn't seem nice. It seems forced. People that are like that all the time, she doesn't seem nice. It's very forced. And whatever, you're allowed to right? You're allowed to be nasty to people. You're accomplished. You're a comedian. You did the whole thing.
There is an attempted comeback by somebody who did not cross one of those fateful lines of the misstepping on their sacred cows of gender or race or sexuality.
Yeah.
But she was said to be a nasty biatch, and that's Ellen Degeneres.
Yeah.
So her show got canceled after she had this testy exchange with Dakota Johnson, where something happened where Dakota said, I had this birthday party, and Ellen said, well, why didn't you invite me? You didn't invite me. And she said, no, I did invite you, Ellen. That's not what happened. And Ellen had blown her off. Yeah. And then tried
Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly just ripped the glitter off Ellen DeGeneres' empire and exposed the chaos hiding behind the confetti. With Joe's savage wit and Megyn's surgical precision, the Queen of Nice was dismantled piece by pastel piece. From fake smiles to backstage drama, they tore through Ellen's carefully curated image like a wrecking ball in a dance studio. This wasn't just a roast, it was a full-blown takedown of daytime's most polished illusion. And it was legendary.
The Ellen situation.
Yeah.
You know, people found out that Ellen was mean, and all these people came out and said, Ellen's actually a fucking bitch. And everybody, I can't believe it. And she lost everything. She fell apart, disappeared, because people found out that this character that she was portraying in a half an hour on a television
It led to article after article of people being like, Ellen is a nasty person. And all these staffers started to come out, not for nothing, but I know a guy, I know him very well, whose sister worked for her, who said, you were not allowed to make eye contact with Ellen in the halls. If you saw her, this is not a nice person. So she eventually got canceled, but now...
If you're enjoying this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Rogan was in rare form. You could tell from the way he leaned back in his chair, eyebrows slightly raised, like he'd just been handed a crystal statue of Ellen DeGeneres with the words, America's sweetheart, etched into it. And he wasn't buying it for a second. The man who spent years sparring with UFC legends, debating psychedelic trips with neuroscientists, and choking conspiracy theories into submission has now turned his comedic focus to the queen of daytime niceness herself.
You know, but I had already known that because I had a buddy who worked for her. Like, he was like, she's a fucking monster.
Yeah.
Her house got broken into while she was at home. My buddy Greg, who was one of the writers, was like, she's a piece of shit.
I didn't know enough to be surprised.
You're allowed to be a bitch. What you're not allowed to do, if an intern's late, they have a hood on. She's got dogs and hoods.
He started slow, like a fighter measuring distance in the octagon. He didn't throw a wild punch, he observed, because Ellen, to Rogan, was a fascinating paradox. A woman who built an empire out of dancing and free giveaways, but who, behind the scenes, apparently ran her studio like a caffeine-starved drill sergeant auditioning for a villain role in a Pixar movie.
You know, but I had already known that because I had a buddy who worked for her. Like, he was like, she's a fucking monster.
Yeah.
Her house got broken into while she was at home. My buddy Greg, who was one of the writers, was like, she's a piece of shit.
I didn't know enough to be surprised.
You're allowed to be a bitch. What you're not allowed to do, if an intern's late, they have a hood on. She's got dogs and hoods.
Joe smirked, saying Ellen's set was like Disneyland if the rides were powered by passive aggression and the mascots needed weekly therapy. He imagined walking onto her stage and getting a smile so bright it could blind satellites, followed by a whisper from a producer warning you not to breathe too loud or make eye contact after 3 p.m., like it was a daytime talk show and a hostage negotiation all in one.
Generous.
Yeah.
So her show got canceled after she had this testy exchange with Dakota Johnson, where something happened where Dakota said, I had this birthday party, and Ellen said, well, why didn't you invite me? You didn't invite me. And she said, no, I did invite you, Ellen. That's not what happened. And Ellen had blown her off and then tried to play the victim on the set with her. Anyway, it led to article.
He couldn't get over how someone with such a public image of kindness had a reputation backstage that read like a Yelp review of a haunted HR department. Joe joked that Ellen's staff probably had a daily chant, not about gratitude, but just asking to be spoken to like mammals. If kindness was currency, Ellen handed out Monopoly money in public and stored gold bricks of sarcasm behind the scenes.
Hey, Ellen DeGeneres, I hope you never find employment again.
Turns out Shorty is a demon. Somebody stop this woman before it's too late.
So former employees actually said that Ellen's be kind mantra, it was all...
Then he dug deeper into the cult of the couch. You know, that signature Ellen-style interview that starts with a compliment, transitions into a prank, and ends with the guest wondering if they were just psychologically jump-scared on national TV. Joe said Ellen wasn't hosting a talk show. She was conducting a human experiment with a laugh track. He mimicked how she'd tell a story about rescuing a puppy, then turn around and dump 4,000 ping pong balls on a pop star just trying to explain their album. Rogan said you couldn't let your guard down on that set. You were one compliment away from being launched into a trapdoor filled with glitter, confetti, and uncomfortable truths. Joe then mused that Ellen was like the human version of a haunted Build-A-Bear, soft and fluffy on the outside, but somehow full of electrical wires and a pre-programmed recording saying, "Be kind or else." He said watching Ellen's brand fall apart was like watching a perfect souffle implode in slow motion, part hilarious, part tragic, and completely inevitable when the ingredients don't match the recipe. He leaned in with that classic Rogan grin and said if Ellen had been a guest on his podcast, the first question would have been, "So when did you realize you were playing a character?" Because he wasn't convinced the smiling dancing queen of daytime was ever anything more than Hollywood's most convincing CGI.
Because it's okay. Because it is okay.
Ellen appeared on the cover of Time, where she actually came out as an openly gay woman, and it was incredibly courageous back then, even though she did get some support. Unfortunately, during that time, America was not ready to watch an openly gay woman on a sitcom. The ratings declined in 1998. It was eventually canceled.
I was not told that it was canceled. I was told through an assistant who read it in the trades.
And just when you thought Joe had gone as far as he could, he pivoted to Ellen's famous pranks. He said only Ellen could convince America that scaring people half to death was the height of kindness. Somewhere in her mansion was a spreadsheet labeled heart rate spikes per guest. He said that wasn't a prank show, it was a training video for low-grade emotional trauma. Joe couldn't help but imagine what Ellen's staff meetings looked like, probably a circle of exhausted assistants, a vision board made of smiling photos and NDAs, and a sign above the door that says, "Laugh, cry, or get replaced." He said Ellen was less of a host and more of a wizard, able to conjure mass appeal with the flick of a wrist, all while operating a secret factory of stress. Then, in true Rogan style, he wrapped his roast in one final jab. He said Ellen's fall from grace wasn't surprising. It was overdue, because no one, not even the nicest brand in Hollywood, can dance their way out of reality forever. And as Rogan leaned back, satisfied with the mental armbar he just applied to Ellen's legacy, Megyn Kelly stepped forward, heel sharp, voice sharper, eyes locked on the same pastel-colored empire. Megyn didn't come in with jokes. She came in with precision. If Rogan was the comedian disarming Ellen with absurdity, Megyn was the prosecutor, calmly flipping through receipts and dragging skeletons from every pristine walk-in closet in the Degeneres estate.
In a middle-class family, she went to school at the University of New Orleans. She was only there for a semester, and then she started working in these nightclubs, establishing herself as a stand-up comic. She's making a living waiting tables, and she gets a big break by being named the funniest comic in America on Showtime.
For a while, you were the funniest person on the planet.
In America, not the planet.
She said the Ellen brand was the biggest lie daytime television ever sold. A rainbow rap machine designed to churn out ad revenue, not empathy. Megyn had been on TV long enough to know the difference between a personality and a persona, and Ellen's, she said, was the most aggressively curated persona since Barbie. She pointed out how Ellen was praised as a trailblazer for coming out, as she should have been, but somewhere along the way, the fight for inclusion morphed into a dictatorship of image. Ellen wasn't just representing herself, she was now managing an empire where everyone had to believe in the fairy tale or be labeled the villain. She wasn't impressed by the whole performative humility. Megyn said Ellen built a stage where every act of kindness came with applause, every donation had a camera angle, and every surprise had a sponsor. It wasn't generosity, it was PR strategy with glitter. She compared Ellen's show to a Hallmark card dipped in Botox. Nothing felt real. The tears, the laughter, the dancing, it was like a simulation of sincerity engineered in a lab run by Instagram influencers and network executives with caffeine addictions.
Run out of Hollywood as she speaks from this grandiose stage on Netflix. Hello, you haven't been canceled.
He was also gay.
Why was it necessary for you to come out, tell the public? Why was it necessary for the character to do so?
Because it's okay. Because it is okay.
Ellen
Megyn then went after the hypocrisy. She said Ellen preached kindness, but never hesitated to throw people under the bus the moment it got bumpy. Staffers, producers, guests. If there was an issue, Ellen suddenly turned into a magician, disappearing faster than her accountability. She mocked how Ellen positioned herself as the ultimate friend of the underdog while hosting some of the most sanitized, celebrity-worshipping interviews ever broadcast. It wasn't about authenticity. It was about protecting the brand, and that brand was more sacred than truth. then maybe that legacy was never about substance to begin with. She brought up how Ellen seemed to play two different games, one in front of the camera, another behind it. And eventually, the games collided. The image cracked. And when it did, the country didn't just stop clapping. They started asking why they ever clapped in the first place.
This is the promo for her Netflix special, and here's a clip.
Decided to take up gardening. I got chickens. Let me see what else I can tell you about that's been going on. Oh yeah, I got kicked out of show business. The Be Kind Girl Wasn't Kind. That was the headline. Here's the problem. I'm a comedian who got a talk show, and I ended the show every day by saying, be kind to one another. Had I ended my show by saying, go fuck yourselves, people would have been pleasantly surprised to find out I'm kind.
Megyn wrapped up by saying Ellen wasn't a monster. She was just the product of a culture that mistakes charisma for character. She rose to power by embodying something people wanted to believe in: warmth, safety, inclusivity. But when the curtain fell, the reality was more complicated. And Hollywood doesn't forgive complicated. It forgets it. She gave one final glance toward the image of Ellen, all pastel smiles and polished shoes, and said, maybe the lesson isn't about Ellen at all. Maybe it's about how fast we crown someone a hero just because they make us feel good. Because in the end, even the Queen of Nice couldn't outdance the truth. Joe and Megyn, from opposite sides of the media universe, had converged on a single point. Ellen DeGeneres wasn't who we thought she was, but on the fantasy. Because with people like Rogan and Kelly at the mic, the show's not over, not by a long shot. Joe wasn't done. He circled back, eyes lit up like he just spotted another inconsistency in the Ellen ecosystem, and said the whole fall felt less like a scandal and more like a magician slipping mid-trick. For years, Ellen had everyone clapping on cue, crying on command, and dancing without question. But now the curtain had slipped, and behind it was a stressed-out staffer holding a coffee tray and a list of people not to make eye contact with.
Fortunately, during that time, America was not ready to watch an openly gay woman on a sitcom. The ratings declined in 1998. It was eventually canceled.
I was not told that it was canceled. I was told through an assistant who read it in the trades.
We didn't hear from her for a few years. It wasn't until 2001, hosting the Emmys. She voiced the animated character in Finding Nemo, and then she launched her daytime show, The Ellen DeGeneres Show, and reminded people why they fell in love with her, and we got a whole new...
He imagined her house parties must feel like sitcom episodes directed by a therapist, vegan snacks, passive-aggressive charades, and a sign over the punch bowl that says no eye rolls within 20 feet of the host. Joe said if Ellen ever invited him over, he'd bring noise-canceling headphones and a GoPro, just in case the laughter was pre-recorded and the appetizers were served with NDAs. Megyn jumped back in with the subtle burn of someone who's lived through a media war zone. She said Ellen's empire didn't just crumble, it evaporated. And the reason? It wasn't one big scandal. It was a million tiny moments of contradiction. Ellen smiled while the ship burned, gave away cars while her employees begged for job security, and did motivational monologues between backstage meltdowns. She mocked the over-choreographed emotions of it all, how every tear on that stage looked timed, every laugh perfectly edited. And somehow, all of that emotion still managed to feel hollow. She compared it to crying at a perfume commercial. Dramatic, slow motion, but meaningless. Megyn said Ellen's show was less about connecting with viewers and more about convincing them she was untouchable. But once the stories leaked, once the Whisper Network exploded into a shout, the untouchable Queen of Kindness found herself ghosted by the very industry that crowned her.
Summer, there were allegations of a toxic work environment at our show. I learned that things happened here that never should have happened. I take that very seriously, and I want to say I am so sorry to the people who were affected.
Ellen took credit or took the blame for all the things that went down, but also made it seem like she didn't know about any of it, when a lot of the accusations were specifically about her being a bully.
She did tell her viewers that, yes, I am that be kind lady that you watch on TV every day. I can't fake it, but she also said she's human, so she's sad.
And just as the image cracked, both Joe and Megyn grinned, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Because the illusion had been shattered, and once people stopped dancing, they finally started paying attention. Joe leaned back, satisfied, while Megyn delivered the final nail. She said Ellen's greatest performance wasn't her stand-up, her sitcom, or her talk show. It was convincing the world she was different from every other celebrity obsessed with image. But in the end, the truth danced louder than the facade ever could. The downfall wasn't dramatic. It was inevitable. Ellen built a kingdom on smiles, but forgot that real kindness doesn't need cameras. Joe nodded, saying Hollywood doesn't need more personalities, it needs authenticity. And Ellen, for all her sparkle, ran out of substance. The lights dimmed, the music faded, and the applause stopped. Because when the truth finally takes the stage, there's no need for a standing ovation, just an honest exit.